Returning now to climate change campaigner Greta Thunberg's voyage from Plymouth to a UN summit in New York. The Swedish teenager is attempting an emissions-free crossing of the Atlantic on a high-tech yacht to avoid plane travel, which emits greenhouse gases. But is carbon-neutral travel a realistic option for the general public, I should say? And will flight shaming actually stop people using air travel? We're going to be following her journey, her attempt to get to New York throughout. But first, joined by visiting Professor of Forecasting and Innovation and London's South Bank University, James Woodhousen, and Friends of the Earth climate campaigner, Aaron Keeley. Hello to you both. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got one or two problems with your earpiece there, Mr. Woodhousen. We'll sort that out and we'll come back to you very shortly. Meantime, let's start with Aaron, should we? I'm guessing you think this is going to be a good idea. Aaron, what can be achieved by what she's doing?
Well, I think what she's going to achieve is kind of a lot building on the success of what she's achieved already. You know, she started the school strike movement last year. She's inspired, you know, hundreds of thousands and millions of people to take action on climate change. And we've kind of seen that movement grow here in the UK too. So I think she has done a phenomenal job in raising the issue of the climate emergency. And I think it's great whenever she goes and speaks to, you know, powerful decision makers, politicians, businesses, she tells it like it is. And she says that people are already suffering from the damage of climate change and breakdown, and that we need bold, radical action now to avoid further catastrophe.
James, I think you can hear me now. The point being, something has to be done, and she's a poster girl for the cause.
Could you say it again? I'm sorry.
Yes, I can. Something has to be done, and that she is a poster girl for the cause.
Well, I think it's very easy, Kay, to be cynical about an initiative like this. And I'm just a bit bored by the right-wing commentators about celebrities who care for the environment, always being guilty, in their view, of virtue signalling. I think Greta Thunberg's courage is commendable. Her PR sense, as Aaron from Friends of the Earth suggests, is very professional. I think the gesture is, however, completely futile and impractical. It's far too expensive. It's far too slow. You and I can't afford it. And I commend the use of carbon fibre in her racing catamaran. It's a fantastic technological development, but it's quite beyond the means, such a vessel, of all of us. And what we really need to be looking forward to is nuclear-powered cruises towards New York and towards America. We need to look for more carbon fibre. We need eventually, perhaps, to think about electric aeroplanes. But this kind of trip, while courageous, is not a practical way of dealing with climate change or the transport needs of the world's population.
Aaron, did I see you flinch slightly there when you mentioned nuclear?
Yeah, I mean, I do. The thing is that I think what Greta's done with this trip is that she's brought to attention the enormous damage that flying does do in terms of climate change and the amount of emissions that it pumps out. You know, it's roughly 1 tonne emitted of carbon dioxide, you know, per person for a return flight from London to New York. And the reality is that that's actually more than you know, a year's worth of emissions per person in 56 countries in the world. So it really just shows how disproportionately bad flying is. So we're going to have to look at reducing the amount of flights. But the reality is that I'd never ever begrudge anyone for, you know, taking a flight, family holiday. But reality is we do need to look at alternatives. We need to be thinking about, can we invest in some of the technology? You know, what can we have some more research and development into kind of electric flights? But also, can we invest in high quality, high speed infrastructure that can help people get around, you know, from continent to continent? I think those are the kind of things that Greta's trip kind of draws attention to.
OK, James, you wanted to interrupt there?
Well, it's very gracious of you, Aaron, and Friends of the Earth, to allow the odd package holiday to Benidorm or somewhere plebeian like that. But the logic of what you're saying is that we cannot visit America. And it's all very well of you to call for more R&D. I see very little on the Friends of the Earth website about research and development. I see a whole lot of people telling other people to cut down their consumption, as you would rather we did. And I think that, you know, this kind of voyage just underlines the gap between green thinking, elite thinking, I would say, establishment thinking, and what the common man or woman in the street needs to visit their relatives in America or Latin America or Asia. Are you really suggesting that we spend 2 weeks getting to New York City in the 21st century? You're not, but you want to have it both ways. And, you know, Greta Thunberg's personality, or at least her spirit, and her courage and the technology that she's adopted to do this very dangerous trip, and I'm wish her the very best of luck on it. That's all commendable. But as a practical solution, I'm afraid that Friends of the Dearth has nothing to offer.
Oh, virtue signalling is what you're doing, Aaron.
I don't think it's just that, Kay, if I may interrupt.
Yeah, go on.
Right, I'm a bit bored by all of that.
Go on.
I'm a bit bored by the sort of Jeremy Clarkson kind of, you know, dissing of people like Emma Thompson. I don't like Emma Thompson. I think she was hypocritical to fly all the way to the Extinction Rebellion and, you know, do it in first class and all the rest of it. But the critique of the Emma Thompsons doesn't go far enough to suggest a practical alternative. I'm very gratified that Aaron does favour new technology for transatlantic crossings.
OK, Aaron, go on.
I mean, yeah, I mean, look, the danger is that we turn this into this whole conversation about climate breakdown and the climate emergency into one around individual actions and, you know, how does one person cut their own individual kind of carbon footprint? You know, Friends of the Earth is very strongly believes that people should be trying to make greener, kind of, you know, more sustainable choices day in, day out. But the reality is, and we know this, is that actually we need to, you know, work collectively together to actually, you know, build a society, to get governments, to get businesses to fundamentally change the way that they do things, so they are just in, you know, they do support a more sustainable way of doing things. You know, move to a zero carbon economy and actually improve living standards for people. I'm not somebody that actually does think that you know, we need a massive reduction in consumption. I think people, you know, we need investment in, you know, to bring up people's living standards. We need warm homes that are well insulated. We need clean air by having cleaner vehicles, more public transport, walking and cycling. You know, we need more wildlife. That means planting more trees. So I think that's actually the kind of world that we're fighting for at Friends of the Earth. We're not interested in virtue signaling. We're interested in actually changing the world for the better.
James?
Well, that's much more encouraging from an environmentalist than I usually hear, and I don't want to start a love-in on air, but I think we're getting closer, you know. But I think you make a revealing turn of phrase there, Aaron, very much one that I hear from the government, that, you know, you want people to make, I guess, more informed, and the word you used was choices about their, you know, behaviour and whether it's sustainable. I put it to you that the force of the government's campaigns, the BBC's campaigns, occasionally Sky News's campaigns, is actually to say that any course of behaviour such as I've entertained and you've begun to entertain is a distraction from cutting consumption, that we don't have choices, that in fact it's a peremptory instruction from government of how we should conduct our lives and behave ourselves and organise our lifestyles. And I resent that. And I think many millions of people in Britain resent it more and more. If you want to move the discussion onto the terrain of new technology to deal with climate change, if you really are opposed to austerity and so on, then I'm perfectly happy to buy you a beer and talk about it. But I think the overall tone from environmentalism today is extremely hostile to freedom and to individual choice. It poses it in terms of choice, but you and I know that the nudge perspective pioneered by the Democrats, Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, has a strongly coercive aspect. If you were in the office and in Friends of the Earth's office and you ate a big non-artificial meat burger and then threw the plastic packaging in the bin and didn't recycle it, you would be sent to Coventry. And that's the kind of atmosphere we can well do without in this country.
Aaron?
look, I just think it's to be welcomed that people are trying to, reduce their meat consumption, for example, or, have less dairy, or try and walk and cycle more, take public transport rather than drive. That is all to be welcomed. But we have to be really, really clear. The scale of the crisis is that people are being flooded. We're seeing heat waves that are deadly, and we're seeing, more and more extreme weather events because of climate change. We need absolutely massive coordinated action from world leaders. Hopefully, Greta is going to persuade and bring her message to many more people when she does go to New York.
Did we never have floods before or heat waves before? Did we never, did we always in Britain protect ourselves against floods? And do I find Friends of the Earth calling for serious flood defences all around Britain and for more research and development in that zone? Do I detect a sense of responsibility from the government and from green organisations, not just to talk about dealing with climate change with technology, but really to plan for it and to take a responsible attitude? I don't. What I hear is more and more, when you talk about climate emergency, is climate hysteria. And I believe in anthropogenic climate change. We are clearly responsible through industrialisation for growing levels of CO2, and in the medium term, which is what the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, talks about, in the medium term we are responsible for climate change to a certain degree. That's one thing. What we do about it is not what we hear very much about. All we hear about is what you rightly bridle at, Aaron, which is great, this perspective of individual consumption.
Okay, let Aaron come back really quickly because we're out of time. Aaron, come back on that.
Yeah, we are talking about big systemic change, and I think that's what we need to be focusing on. Cutting as much carbon pollution as we can and building a fairer, greener society.
Okay, good to talk to both of you. Come back soon. Thank you. Still to come on the programme for you are your holidays.